Welcome to the Full Grain Podcast. I am Phil Callis with Nick Horween, who has an incredible voice today. Say hello, Nick, please.
It's a little scratchy, so I'll try not to clear my throat every 10 seconds.
You look beautiful. And we have a special guest
Thank you.
here today. We've got Ben Robinson from Stitchdown. Really excited to talk to Ben about the Stitchdown boot camp. Personally, it's a selfish reason that I have Ben on here, but we're also going to talk about the Patina Thunderdome. And then we really would like to get Ben's take on different leathers around the world. So you guys ready to start this off?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No? All right.
Podcast.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
What's a podcast?
Let me elegantly segue us into a chat about the Patina Thunderdome. What did you participate in this last 6 months?
I did.
What'd you do?
I participated every year, and I didn't finish this year.
What?
Which was horrifying. And I don't know that anybody noticed or cared, but here I am, just like other people in various months throughout the contest, and certainly the last one. I never took the pictures. It was raining like 3 inches a day. I like taking my pictures outside in the same place. And then it was April 6th.
Tell me what boots you were wearing for the Thunderdome and why you chose them.
Okay, so I had two, and one of them only made it 4 months, I think. Largely because I just wasn't wearing them enough. 2 years ago, I wore these boots that we made with Ron Ryder, these Chelsea boots. Just this Fritz Chelsea that Ron's been making at the Cortina factory for years. And it's fabulous. It's just the perfect kind of all-around Chelsea boot. Not too fancy, but you could dress them up a little bit if you needed to. And so I had a different pair, also Merriam horse butt, this waxed salvia horse butt, which is kind of like green-gray and starts out more gray and kind of gets more like green-brown over time. And I mean, they're really cool. They're so cool, but I was just hooked on these Russell moccasins, different pair, in this tan Laramie suede on a lactate heaviest sole, fishing Oxfords, which is this obsession that I've had ever since I kind of started doing this. And then I met, I don't know, one of my like shoe shaman buddies in New York. Shout out Jovan. And so as soon as he sent me this website, this Cosmic Jumper website from Japan, and they were making all these Russells back in like, I don't know, 2012, 2017, whatever. And they don't sell these things anymore, but they have pictures of everything that they ever made on the site. And I would just go on there every night and look at these things and then try and get Russell Moccasin to make them together. Let's make some cool stuff. I got all sorts of ideas. There's no reason that people shouldn't absolutely love these things. They're the most comfortable shoes you could ever imagine. They're cool and weird and funky and like all the stuff that I personally love. We started working on them, and these were the pair that I was most excited about. So I had a sample that I don't know, they're just fabulous. Yeah, just put them through it. But I wore those things at least 5 days a week for 6 months, even if I didn't finish the contest.
Yeah. Good on you. Yeah, at least you wore them. Yeah, so with the
Do
Russells,
people know, how would you describe the Patina Thunderdome? Because I don't even know if people know what we're talking about.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. The Stitchdown Patina Thunderdome, properly branded, is a boot-wearing event where the goal is to show how different footwear and different leathers we're in from a bunch of different people all over the world. And the cool thing is I actually won a prize 1 year too, and it was really neat. And then you guys sent me another pair of boots from Jim Green, which is great. So it's a really fun way for me. The thing I like most about it is that you're able to see a potential future of different boots or shoes that you might be interested in. So when you're describing Russell moccasins in, I forget the name of the suede already, it was some stuff I had never heard of. But if I was interested,
Tan Laramie suede,
the tan Laramie suede, I'd be like, man, I would really like to know what that's going to look like, or how does that hold up? How does it? Because a lot of the the reason that people are wearing some of this footwear is because it is durable and it develops and becomes a part of you in the same way that raw denim or wood or natural materials tend to age and wear in nicely. So I think that's the fun of Patina Thunderdome. You kind of keyed in onto some stuff that I don't love about it, which I kind of wanted to talk about too. But Nick, did you also participate in the Thunderdome for this round?
I did, and I made it all the way to the end.
For once.
No, every time. I made it every time to the end.
Do you still wear those?
Wait, no, that's not true. That's not true. Last year, I dropped out because the boots that I wore were defeated me because they were too beefy to break in.
See, that's legit. That happens, you know? Like, just opt out at that point because it's not what we don't want anybody to hurt themselves.
Yeah, I was going to get hurt.
Yeah,
definitely. But no, I do the evergreens. To your point, I still wear those, and those are like some of my most comfortable shoes because I wear them so much, and they were comfortable anyway. But they're awesome. And then this year I wore some brown woolly Chrome XL Viberg service boots, which are pretty great.
110.
110, yeah.
I've been tracking you.
Yeah. Well, the 110 is my favorite. The 110 fits me really well. I think some of their last maybe look a little bit more elegant, but for fit, that's the one for me.
I'm with you, 100%.
Nick, why did you pick the woolly Chrome XL? And maybe you could explain what woolly Chrome XL is, because I think that's a less common variant of Chrome XL, but happens to be pretty nice.
I picked them because they were super nice, and they had done a run of them a while ago, and I had sort of I had stealthily secured a pair in 110 when they had run it as part of the larger run. I think I can't remember exactly how I ended up with them, but Brett helps me out with the sizing at times. But I'd never worn woolly in footwear until now. I had belts like all day long. Like I probably have 30 woolly belts because I think it's my favorite belt leather overall. I think it's one of the best. But yeah, I'd never worn it as boots, and I had this pair, and I'd been saving them for whatever reason, and it was a good chance to wear them, and they're awesome. I mean, it's like regular Chrome XL, but it has a even more robust stuffing blend into it, and we call it woolly because it has a higher lanolin content. Thus the name woolly, and that has the effect of making the available colors even darker because there's more grease in it, and the smell is crazy. They have a very like sweet, I don't want to say pungent because that's sort of like a bad connotation, but very strong. Like you can wear them, and if you like get in your car and it's warm out, like you'll smell your boots in like a nice way. I was surprised at how durable they were. I thought I was going to get a lot more wear over the 6 months because I was wearing them like at least 5 days a week, and like not being gentle with them. And we had a pretty mild winter in Chicago, so maybe that's part of it. But yeah, they didn't change as much as I thought they were going to. But they are going to give them like another 3 years, and it'll be perfect.
I'm going to ask Nick about that woolly a little bit more because you say it just has more of the lanolin type material in the stuffing blend. I know that's true, but also there's something interesting about the density of the woolly compared to Chrome XL Classic, where my observation is the woolly is more packed in or something. So maybe that's addition. Maybe there's some harder waxes in the stuffing blend. I'm actually not certain, but it certainly feels like a more full version of Chrome XL with like a less sort of like pillowy feel when you squeeze it. Like it's got a little bit more bite to it. Am I perceiving correctly?
I think what's often heavier weights, like you almost never see it below like 5.5 ounce. So I think that's part of it because you just never see it in those lighter weights that you do on some of the other stuff. And also it tends to, the default for it is to be plated on both sides. And I think that has a lot to do with the density. I think that additional plating from the backside kind of compresses and packs everything in and gives it that more. I don't want to say veg-like, but more like, sort of denser feel. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense because I guess you're right. When I think about a wax flesh or like Chicago Chrome Excel, which is Chrome Excel finished on both sides, it has a similar vibe to the woolly. Okay, it's been packed in literally with the plating. Yeah. That's cool. Did you check out those photos, Ben? What do you think?
Yeah, they look great. They started getting moving about halfway through.
Are these photos publicly available if I wanted to direct people somewhere to look at things?
Yeah, I mean, the best place that I would say, I mean, we're gonna have to start focusing on the winners here pretty soon. In about 48 hours. But yeah, I can post some of these at some point on the Patina Thunderdome Instagram account, but
I'll link that in the
Patina project. I mean, like the app, like shout out this contest, like everything that you mentioned, Phil, kind of helping people see into the future of what their next pair of boots could be, or whatever, right? Like however you want to kind of use this leather. It could be a wallet, it could be a belt, it could be whatever, but really boots is incredibly well contained in this Patina project app. Like if people are wearing them and they're posting pictures and they're sending them to me, which is basically how the first year contest went. We had a submission, real janky submission form. Shout out Jarmal for setting it up. It was fantastic, actually. And then I would post some on Instagram, and people would definitely share them in the Discord, or Stitchdown Discord, and people would see them, but the wider, kind of ever-reaching public could not. And so we teamed up with Ted and Hillary, who were just kind of longstanding members of our wonderful community, and they're app developers. They're like, hey, I'm working on this app. What if we used it to host all these pictures that you have? I was like, this is incredible. And we worked eventually on submission, and reminders for submission, and commenting, and sizing advice, and all that kind of stuff. And it's incredible. Like you have to go in and you could search for woolly Chrome Excel in one of the past Thunderdomes, or this past one that we just wrapped up, and you could see Nick's boots, and you can see him from day one all the way through. I mean, there's hundreds. I mean, I feel like we're going to cross 1 million photos of contest boots in this app before too long. I should get that number.
That's crazy.
It's a good app. I like the app.
It's really cool. I mean, it's come so far just in terms of what it can offer, and in that kind of look to where it's going, right? Like it's not just another app that you like futz around on and look at things and eventually buy something. Like all those things can happen on this app too.
It's that too. Yeah.
Like you can definitely do those things. But it is more of like a harder core like research tool if you want to look at it that way. I use it all the time to just, I don't know if we're working on a collaboration or just somebody's interested in, I get a DM from somebody and they're like, what's this leather going to do? I just kind of zoom through the app, find a search real easily, and then send it to them.
Is the app free for people that are not participants?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we'll hook up people with that too if they don't know about it. The other thing,
Patina project, it's great.
Yeah,
It really is pretty cool, and I'm thrilled that we're like even remotely associated with it. The whole contest runs through it, so we're quite associated with it. But I would take even like a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you've done an incredible job with Stitchdown, not only creating your website, but I think the most powerful thing you've done is bring a community together. And the way you described it is, hey, I just gave them a place to talk. With the Discord is what I have in mind right now. And shout out to everybody in the Discord, Stitchdown Discord, which I believe you have to pay to be a part of. Is that still accurate?
It is, yeah.
Would you consider having a free version where you only get like one channel or something? Because that might be a smart play.
I mean, I don't know if Discord can function like that. Probably.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, maybe. I mean, the fact of the matter, well, there's multiple facts to the matter, but one is there's something to a more controlled community. And that can come from a lot of different angles, I think. One is, you can have, like, we didn't have any moderation for a while, like for almost probably over 3 years, actually. And it was just, kind of self-built community and culture that was done very intentionally, right? Like, how should we treat each other mostly? And that more than like, what should we talk about? Because, it's people on the internet, and I think that can go awry very quickly. So that was always the goal, just to create like a really kind of nice, interesting place to be, but one where people weren't afraid to also say what they felt, right? These things are immediately intersecting, even in this one sentence. But yeah, it worked out really beautifully for a while, and it grew and it grew. And like to this day, I would absolutely say it continues, but like there have definitely been moments where it becomes the internet and people who know each other, but also don't, and, live different lives. And so we kind of recruited some wonderful moderators that keep an eye on things and most days don't have to do anything at all. Right. So I love that part about it. But also, like, if you are self-selecting to say, I think this is worth it, and I'm going to invest, small, like $5 a month, right? Small amount of money. And a lot of the members come from listening to the podcast because we talk about it on there, and they like that. And it's a way to support that podcast and everything else that we do. Like, it's, it is a business. But one that hopefully people really like and connect with, and that goes far. But if you are this self-selecting member, then you're probably going to behave a little better, as opposed to, here I am to cause trouble on the internet because I'm bored at work, right? It's growing, which is nice. The Thunderdome is definitely a part of that, and I think it's a good way to introduce people to what the overall community can be, which extends far beyond the confines of the internet at this point, which is great. But yeah, I mean, it's, you don't want 100,000 people in there. I don't.
Based on what you were saying, I think I know the answer, but did you start out as like identifying this as, oh, there's a business opportunity here, or is this something that you were doing for fun that then developed into a business?
Like the whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
100% the idea was I could slowly eventually build a business around it. 100%. Yeah, it was never like a hobby project. I left, a media job that I was at for a year after I left another media job that I was at for 10 years. And yeah, I literally made a list of like shit that I liked. It was like, how can I build a small media company? Because like the bigger and middle size, and basically every digital media company right now it's not pretty. And like 6 years ago when I started thinking about this, it was clear that was coming, but because it was all about audience, right? It was about growth and Facebook and like, let's get 1 billion views on things, like, and then let's tell the brand that we want to advertise with us exactly who our super cool audience is. Like, no, like it stopped making sense, and everything was overfunded. Like, this is a whole different podcast. But yeah, I mean, I saw some things that just kind of made sense in like a smaller vision of what like an actually really cool, interesting media company could be. And I've always been like deeply interested in community of all kinds, like the ones where you're in person and you see each other constantly, or I like those too. And like kind of grew up in that in various ways. But yeah, just like internet community stuff. Like, I bought my first car. It's like random Volkswagen that they made for 5 years, like from a website that took 20 minutes to load. And then bought parts and sold parts to like the people on that website, and like so niche, way more niche than boots. And that has applied to like a number of other things over the years that are personal interests of mine. And yeah, there was always just something like fascinating about it. And it was the flip of the media that I was in previously, which was like accumulate every eyeball of every, like Midwestern mom, like reading your story and then tell them it was like a super cool 24-year-old guy who also had a net worth of $17 million. And so like advertise with us. Like I enjoyed all of that. And I think that great things were accomplished by like people not named me, who I just was lucky enough to work with. But yeah, this was like totally the opposite. It was like, this is all like I'm thinking about. So why wouldn't I start something I think I could do a decent job? I have enough experience. But yeah, I mean, the pitch to my wife was, yeah, so we're going to build a business out of it. It might take a little while, but definitely.
I guess I'm not surprised at that, but at the same time, a slight bit. I just feel like your writing is really good, and I really like your just overall style, Ben. I know you're shaking your head.
Lost it.
I love your writing style. I think it's fun and light, which it's easy to read. It's like for me, like I suck so much, it's always dead serious. Like here's a fact, but I like your style. Even in the somewhat more casual correspondence that you would have about Thunderdome announcements, I just like that was fun, and that's actually why I'm surprised that it was you're describing as mostly a professional effort, because it feels very authentic. So I don't know how much you have to try to do that, but when I listen to your podcast, I like that too. And when I hear you here, it doesn't seem like you're not loving shoes.
No, I mean, that's the thing, is that like, even on, it's like, it's tough, man. Like the fact, I don't want anybody to feel bad for me. Like this is an absolute dream that I get to do this every single day. But like, yeah, I don't have any sort of business background. Like I understand how media businesses work, but like running a business, I mean, you guys know what that's like. Like it's awful. Those are the things that I don't want to do, and I'm not very good at. And I never want to do anything other than what feels like what people actually want, Like I kind of want to interpret what people want and then help them further that, as opposed to be like, here's what you need, like the 1,000,000 best Chelsea boots of this week. Like, go buy them all right now. Like I have zero like most of these businesses are built on affiliate revenue, which is not what. Actually, at the beginning, it was like, here's the business plan. My beautiful wife, like,
yeah, affiliate
all this affiliate revenue. Like, I know how to do it, and yeah, the longer it's gone, the more I care about that less, because it kind of makes decisions for you and like makes you tell people to buy something right now, or else it doesn't work. So it's like, all right, how do we end around that? Like the whole mission is like, I love this stuff. I understood vaguely at the beginning, but very quickly once I got into it, that there's barely any reason that the kind of businesses that make this footwear or this leather should really exist. Like it's not a pot of gold. It's kind of a little creaky in terms of the fundamentals of these businesses. So how do we continue that? How do you make sure that 200-year-old companies and 10-year-old companies alike, and the company that's going to start in 2 years from now and is just starting to think about it or sampling or whatever, like how do they all succeed? And the answer is just get people interested in it.
What do you mean by, you said creaky old business? And I live inside a creaky old business. I'm just curious, from the outside looking in, like, what do you mean when you say that?
I mean, everything about the manufacturing, with what you do for sure, and especially with, a great old Goodyear welted shoe brand, like it's not a modern streamlined machines making everything. Like there's an incredible amount of human input that is required to do it this way. Many of the best footwear brands that have been around for ages and ages are wonderful because everything they do hasn't changed since like the war, and it can be confusing and frustrating and all that, but you're like, okay, these are the things that are happening that are maybe frustrating me, or people like don't understand, and I'm trying to help people understand it, and it's like, but it's just the way they do it, and they're like, well, why? And I'm like, but it's also what makes them wonderful, right? It's like this refusal to budge and change in ways that would lessen the product, cheapen the product, like turn into, like modern day Florsheim versus old Florsheim, right? And I think that the creakiness, right? I don't know. I like old houses. I mentioned cars before. Like one new car in my entire life, and it's a minivan, which I also love. It's great. It's very, very functional and more fun to drive than you think. I don't know. I kind of like old stuff, right? Like didn't make them like they used to, whatever. And I think if there isn't some level of inherent creakiness, you're kind of lost. I will say the Crockett and Jones factory like is all of that. Like it's old and historic and hasn't changed, but it's also like incredibly modern in terms of processes and things like that. But it's like it's still got it. It's still got that core and that soul, and like the family lineage stuff is so important. Like most times when things change hands out of this family who was just so crazy that they had to keep pushing in the old way, everything be damned. When that changes, like it's usually kind of done, or maybe it begins like a bit of a death cycle or a change from what it used to mean.
I have a question that is slightly off of our. This section was going to be about the Thunderdome, but this is more interesting to me. When you're talking about making content and having all these different bits of, you have the podcast, which I love, by the way. You've got your articles on Stitchdown.com, and then everything in Discord, and now YouTube as well. You're adding some video components. There's a bit of a game these days that some of those larger media corporations play, and you're defining yourself as very small. Do you ever feel like you can fall into these similar traps where you have to have the most clickbaity title and you have to have the most clickbaity picture, which I am guilty of too? I worry sometimes that we will make content that is feeding an algorithm as opposed to feeding that fun creakiness that you're describing. You ever think about these types of things, Ben?
Every day.
Say more.
More?
Okay.
That was a question. No, I mean, it seriously is an everyday thing. And yeah, and like the job that I had for 10 years, again, like I loved it. Some of my favorite people in the world I know from there. And we did some remarkable stuff. And I think we did everything better than we needed to, like for the internet. It's like, how do you give them a little bit more? And I'm going to kind of pitch this and do believe in it as, well, this will like solidify what we're doing. People will like this better if we do it a little better. Right. But also it was kind of like a pitch, to the bosses to be like, no, we need to do this for this, but it's actually something that you just enjoy more, and the people doing all the work enjoy more. And like, wasn't it great? But back then we talked a lot about like, all right, there are these internet tricks, right? And everybody's doing them. And so we have to be aware of them, and we have to, consider packaging. That was like a big word at the time. I actually haven't thought about it in a while. How do we package this so it's going to go crazy on Facebook, or, we kind of move to Google search after Facebook, before Facebook started to die, luckily. And then they're going to click on it because they're on the internet and their brain tells them to do it, right? But then once they get there, it's like, ooh, wait a minute. Like, this is actually kind of good or kind of funny or legitimately helpful or, easy to read or tells me exactly what I wanted. And then you've won, right? And I think, like, again, I don't know. I'm certain that I'm doing like the business growth wrong in this way. But it's like, actually, what if we didn't care about that at all? What if we drove directly against that and we're like completely shooting ourselves in the foot? And there are aspects of it that like you need to take into consideration. Like you need to take time, you need to write a good headline, but that's not some internet thing. Like that's just how do you get anybody to read anything anywhere in a newspaper in the 40s or now? And every once in a while, especially with YouTube, more with YouTube than anything, which we're like not consistent with and I don't know, not very good at, frankly, but that's growth, right? To come, hopefully. But in terms of like playing the YouTube game, and it seems like everybody on YouTube is there for the game, maybe you go a little too far with like a video title or something like that. And then you're like, oh, why did we do that? Like all this work, all these years, and now we've ruined it all. There's a big one with Weston where like I was like, I refute Rose Anvil, and like every day I'm getting comments on it.
I mean,
probably a year later.
That's the
now.
game, right?
Like, you didn't even refute him. I'm like, I know. That's the whole point, dude. Like, we actually were just having a conversation, and we were talking, and like he was there too, and he quite liked it, and like we're friendly. So stop thinking that like I'm out, but like they're coming in droves, being like, "You're so dumb. Like, how could you say this? Alden is terrible." I'm like, but they're not, and let's stop being dangerously reductive. Like dangerously reductive. And so I mean it's an easy trap to fall into, and it's also the way to do it for most people creating the content on YouTube. And like I don't think any less of any of them.
You see this happen in politics and many other, like every other subject. What I think about a lot with like this specific niche with footwear and this specific type of footwear is I'm noticing it goes to what's the absolute craziest shoe or boot, or like what's this thing I've never seen before. And I see it go that way where I'm old enough now. We're very old, where I think a lot about quality footwear, and I still think of Alden, right? But it's pretty boring to talk about Alden because it's not exciting. It's intentionally creaky, as you might say. And it's pretty tough to make a video about Alden right now because it's all been said. You don't need to keep talking about it. As much as I love it, like, and I would love to keep talking about it, I feel like you could find so much content about that. So my fear is that as we progress through even something like the Patina Thunderdome, which is the original topic here, the Thunderdome is going to morph into like the craziest clown shoe, like I think that's just the inevitable result of where all this goes, though. It's like a one of one outrageous something that's never existed, and it's going to show up in the Thunderdome. It's going to show up on YouTube videos, and it kind of turns into this thing like you could that only that one person can experience and not the whole community can experience, and that's my fear.
Okay, so the quick counter to that is everybody can enjoy it. And they don't need that exact thing, right? And that is the thing with one of ones is, sometimes you do want it, but like in this year's Thunderdome, I don't even have it in front of me. When we're taping this, the results have not been.
Right. Yet. Actually, speaking of that, you're releasing the results before this comes out, I think. Are you releasing them on Wednesday?
Yeah, so it'll be Wednesday.
Yeah. So this,
if we get everything in shape, all the content, and
this will come out after the results are out.
The fancy thumbnail. Yeah. So I mean, but I can't have you guys knowing either.
No, I don't want to know.
It's fucking locked. But I'm thinking of.
You just tell us. It's fine.
The top pair could be reproduced easily. there's probably very few, but there's something from Brian the Bootmaker in there in the top 10. But there's also like a whole lot of nicks that just work, and whites that like you could go and order, which is great. But yeah, I mean, there is this class of somebody got it, and who knows where they got the leather, right? Like, speaking of Florsheim, stuff from Nathan Florsheim, back in Chicago now, who makes like a lot of Horween leather that Tannery Row has a very limited amount of, and somebody gets it and they send it to Nathan. And it's difficult because you can only make so many boots in a year, like 40 or 50. And so those are like real one of ones. Like, could you get it? Yes, but it would take you years. And if that's like your goal and your mission and like your quest that you think is gonna make you happy, like by waiting, like I'd love that. I very much support that. And it's for a certain type of person. The other side of it is, yeah, like how deep are we going to drive into this whole situation in terms of like interest is good, fascination is better, like need, like that's what I need. I need this thing that is impossible to obtain. And if like that's your quest and you're cool about it, great. If you're like, I need this tomorrow and I don't understand kind of how this all works, and so I'm gonna like get upset because somebody can't make me this boot right when I want it, even though I've got the money, like the wallet's out. That's not great. I mean, these are the things too. Like, how are you helping these brands, new or hundreds of years old, if you're not also encouraging people to like get stuff from them, like that they can get, and it's not just this chase of this like magical elusive thing. I mean, I think about that all the time.
Can you tell me with the Thunderdome this year how many entries there were, and then tell me a little bit about the process for that you guys are going for judging all these?
Yeah, so it was, I don't have the exact number, but it's like 1,100 this year, between two categories: work, which is like you're working in your boots, not necessarily every day, but like if you are like doing like work, enter that category, and the open category. And yeah, so it was 1,100. I think last year there were over 800, and this year there was some growth there, which was really cool, especially on the work side. Ad read for Nick's Boots, which put up an incredible prize lineup. And yeah, the judging was great once again. Like I worry that we lack a couple things in judging, like diversity, and then like actual diversity, and then diversity year to year, because it's just a whole bunch of dudes doing it. But that's where we're at, and they've gotten really, really good at it. Like the open judges have been there since the first year, and this was the third year. And then Dave, Rugged Workwear, and Carl Morawski have been the work judges for the last 2 years, and they're just so invested in it. Like I get all this data, we put into a spreadsheet, and you can look at the pictures and read the reviews, and you kind of gotta, there's some stuff that at some point you have to give most of these pairs, sorry. And so we do a little bit of that beforehand, and I send them like a cut down version of like what might be contenders a couple days beforehand, and everybody comes in so prepared. And yeah, the process, we figured it out at this point. Nobody shows up on time. Most people are, enjoying a beverage. And then we were up until 2 a.m. again for the open dome this year, and the work dome with just slightly fewer entries was luckily not quite as long. And first you just open them all up and you talk about everything, every single pair, every one of them. You go down the whole list and talk about if you think they're great or if they're not, and everybody has to agree.
How big is the list at this point that you've whittled down?
For open, it was 230.
Oh my God.
And for work, it was like 80, which was about half the field.
Is there a specific rubric that you're going off of, or is it just like, hey guys, let's talk about 200 boots in a row?
I mean, that first wave is let's just talk about them.
Wow.
Let's kind of get all our thoughts out there. We really like this one. Sometimes you talk about one for 10 minutes. And you're like, okay, let's get back to this. But clearly there's something about this that we're interested in. And sometimes you're like, enough people say like it's not there. Like you really have to whittle it down. So you do need to make decisions at some point, as kind of rough as it is. And then you get through that, you take a break, and you're like, okay, what do we think could be in the top 10 or top 5? And you start throwing that stuff around. And you're like, okay, yeah, I could see that. And through that process, you're like, okay, yeah, this one it would be crazy for us to drop this one out of the top 5, but you've actually discussed it quite a bit. You've looked back, last month, first month is kind of the cleanest test. But then you look through the whole thing. You're like, oh, yeah, I see that they did like a nice conditioning in like month 4, like they're taking care of these things. Great.
Oh, is that a pro tip? Is that
wear and care, baby? That's it. You gotta wear them, but you gotta care for them. We're not in the business of destroying boots. You want to have them forever after that. You want something that you really love and feels great because you broke it in extensively. And then, other stuff like not everybody did it. It was optional this year, which I thought was great and was intentional. But there's like a review process, and that helps, especially on the app. It helps people with sizing. It helps people with how the leather ages, like any sort of quirk. Like there are little categories that you can fill out, but it's anything you want to say. And then people are also telling their stories about like what they did in these things, like that's the part at the top that I kind of wanted to come back on. Is it is this incredible resource for people to, look into this future of maybe their next pair or whatever, but it's also just like a ride. And the people who approach it as that, as opposed to I'm here strictly to win, they have the best time. And I get notes from so many of them being like, yeah, nothing happened with the leather on this thing. Like it was too tough, or I lived my life wrong or whatever. But like, let me tell you about some things that happened to me while I was wearing these boots, places I've been. Like, somebody's always getting married in their Thunderdome boots. Like it's kind of incredible. So like,
give us a non-marriage example.
I mean, honestly, that's where the work dome probably comes in, because you look at these things and you're like, okay, let's judge this. Like, oh, I don't know, Carl and Dave are like, I don't know if these things are being up enough. I'm like, all right, well, this person was an electrician, like, does this look like an electrician's wear? They're like, yeah, it does, which is totally different than the wear of somebody pouring concrete or whatever. And those stories where there's like job site photos and tough days out there, and like the boots got me through, and like it all sounds so fucking corny, but it's like it's not, right? Like it actually meant a ton to all these people, right? One of the top winners in the open dome, he was so honest with it, and like the boots were, God, they're so cool. But he's like, yeah, it was a lot of desk work, but also I like harvested a ton of coffee, like in my spare time, and was like, okay, yeah, this adds up, like, and like never took them off, like wore them every day, all day. There's a pair of whites, so like they can take it, but like all day, every day is not usually recommended. But he's like, I wore these from sun up to sundown for 6 months straight and just loved every second of it, except for maybe like the first couple of weeks, like a really tall pair of whites and wax flash. And yeah, I mean, that's that's what I like really love most about it. Like I really do. And this is like the time to kind of hear about it all the most and just like feel people's connection. It's all about connection, right? Like there's a fascination, there's an appreciation for like the beauty even of like highly rugged patterning, you know? Like there's something very right about this boot, even though there's plenty of others that look like it that most people would never notice, but once you get into it, you start to see. But really it's just about like, yeah, like having these things take you somewhere.
I want you to pitch me on why I should come to the boot camp.
It's great. You should come because it's just an incredibly fun time in ways that I hope for the first year, but did not expect to be fully realized. Basically, the short, long story is always wanted to do events, always wanted to get people together because whenever you meet anybody who loves this stuff, it's just they're at first, especially if it's like a larger group, let's call it 25 people, everybody stands around for like a few minutes and you're like, okay, what do we do now? I guess you're wearing boots. Like, should we just ask each other about our boots? And then the dam breaks and it's like, oh, we're going to ask each other about our boots and we're going to talk about stuff. We're going to talk about other things that we love, but like it all just makes sense. And so, yeah, I always wanted to like do events and put together something. At first it was like a big sample sale and I was kind of working on it. And then it was COVID. It was like, oh my God. Why do we care about any of this? Like this all seems really bad. And then you discover very quickly that people are, you know, finding a refuge in this, right? I remember being just really depressed, being like, why? And then it was like, wait a minute, we're all seeming to enjoy this. Like this is doing something good for us. So last year we got 22, I think, like boot brands, tanneries, an educator, my guy Aki from the College of Creative Studies in Detroit, who runs a footwear design program, which is very rare in this country. Like just doesn't exist, but also like they make stuff. They have like a fully functioning shoe workshop in Detroit. And like he called me up. He's like, can we come? I was like, sure. What? I didn't think about this at all. Like, yeah, how do we support this next generation of people who think that this is a cool thing to do with their lives and their careers? And yeah, it was 2 days in Brooklyn at Industry City, incredible venue for our purposes, especially. And, you know, there's like these fundamentals of it, right? Like these things are just pictures on the internet until you see them in person. And it's very rare, even in New York, to have any sort of concentration of that. So let's put it in front of people. You can touch them, you can feel them, you can see how the weight is different on them. You can obviously, you know, marvel at how they're put together. But also you can try them on. But everybody who would be showing at last year's event, this year's event, hopefully many to come, they feel that too. And I think when, you know, the customer, if we really want to, the customer, the person who buys my shit, no, it's like just another person who is every bit as invested in this as you and happens to need boots or like buying boots or whatever. When those two come together, it's just like it's really special. There's something to it. And then when that community is all together, whether they know each other or not, like, I mean, I don't know, the vibes of last year were excellent. And
come for the vibes, you would say.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, like if you want some vibes, I imagine the vibes will be there again.
Something
like last year, they really were, like everybody was just so happy to be there, like in ways that I could not fathom and loved every second of. And I fed off that and everybody did. And it turns into like a big old party too, you know, like it just, the nature, we had a great beer sponsor, shout out Untitled Art, my boy Isaac, who I met because he loves boots. He started hitting me up on Instagram and we talked forever, and he's like, oh, by the way, I own this brewery. Like, we do something together. It was like, yeah, let's make this cool custom beer for the event that my wife loves and we're running out of, which is going to turn into a problem at some point. But yeah, it's just, I mean, people were up until 2 a.m, like salsa dancing at this venue, and we didn't expect that. And then yeah, just like all the cool people, like, you know, shoot, like boot makers and shoemakers who make stuff with their hands, who I have met before and had never met in my life and never even talked to online, just came to this thing, which I thought was so cool because, you know, it's largely represented by like factory brands, and they loved it.
Can I present another Phil deep thought to you guys?
Yeah.
Something I think we've lost over the last couple decades is the relationship with a retail store.
Oh,
and I think,
gone.
yeah, it's a little sad. And I think what you're doing with boot camp, as well as on, Discord, I know there's brand representatives that pop into those channels too that will talk to you. It's sort of bringing back that connection where it's putting a real human being behind a product, which is something I think about a lot for my personal or my professional side of my life. I think that the Amazonification of products has sort of ruined that relationship that you might have with a clothier or somebody to sell you a shirt, where they really understand you and you really trust them, and they'll put you right into a product that's gonna serve you well. So to me that's what I like about what you're doing here is giving some of that relationship and FaceTime with people. So thank you for that. And I'm planning to go this year, but I have some further questions that are not as exciting. But so is it on like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday kind of thing?
Saturday, Sunday this year.
Just Saturday, Sunday. If
October
I flew
12th
in
and 13th.
Let's say I flew in on like a Saturday morning, could I have a good time if I got there early and then just bail that night? Or would I need to stay a night, you think?
No, I mean, you could do a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
And
I mean, the night part is when it really starts to heat up, because that's when like basically this whole complex, it's like this old industrial complex. I think it's 4 city blocks in Brooklyn with 2 buildings per block and then a courtyard in between each. And then obviously like a street in between, but it's like, you can't go any further. Like then it's kind of the water. And so they've just, I mean, there's everything, right? Like we partnered with the brewery in the place to have a party, and the distillery that also has another brewery the second night. And like all of that, it's all right there. Like you kind of don't have to leave. There's incredible food.
you got like is there a hotel in those 4 blocks also?
They're building a hotel in Industry City that won't be ready for this year. But yeah, there's some hotels further down there in like Sunset Park, which isn't, it's bordering an old industrial zone. It's New York. And then there's like hotels up in Park Slope that are like 1 subway stop away, or downtown Brooklyn. I mean, you can say pretty much, it's very easy to get to. But yeah, you wouldn't miss that part, because then like all the people from the brands are out, like really hanging out then, which is very fun. And then everybody, I mean, you turn it as loose as you want to.
All right.
But yeah, like the day itself is like, I don't know. I mean, we gotta get it again, right? Like first year went
I'm
great.
not saying
Who cares?
I'm not saying that's the plan. I'd like to go and spend a night, hang out, have some cigars with,
it's New York.
with
It's
Steve
not
from
the cheapest place.
Beatos. I saw him doing cigars. That looked like fun.
Yeah. Steve was out there late, just kind of puffing away.
That's
great, but I'd been in touch with Steve, but I'd never met him. Like there's just like you can meet the boots,
and he wasn't an exhibitor.
person.
He was a fan.
Yeah, he was just hanging out.
Yeah.
He might. We're maybe cooking something up this year. We've been
okay
on the repair side, like which is not something I really considered last year. And then these guys came and they're like, how do we get involved in this? And I'm like, well, let's do it cool. We're trying to cook up some pretty fun things.
Okay.
And this year, like there's like things that you can actually do too. So last year, Crown Northampton, who makes incredible Horween shell cordovan sneakers, they have a sub brand called E Woodford. Not it's its own brand, really. That's like very, very high end, as handmade as things get. Shoes and boots, like really cool stuff that Chris has been spinning up for a while now. And so they brought over their whole workshop that they were making shoes all day long, like actual shoes that, some of them are going to be samples to show what they can do, but like some of them are like people's shoes. And then you could sign up to work for about 20 minutes on like hand welting, inseaming, I think my terminology is right. A shoe, which I did when I was over at Northampton. And that was, we put up, tickets for that, and they sold out in like a minute for, I think, 40 slots or 50 slots or something. So we're like, whoa, there's something here. And everybody who did it, like, things changed for them. They realized what this was all about and saw it very differently and got a little certificate of completion, which some people have prominently displayed, which is wonderful. We're like, okay, so how do we do more with this? So we're partnering with Brooklyn Shoe Space, and Keiko, who runs it, is another person who just came to this thing that I knew about but had never met before. And she thought it was really cool, which was wonderful. And they're kind of like a shoemaking workshop where you can go and take classes. So we're going to have those classes and other leatherworking classes and things like that.
Nice.
On site in like a totally different workshop space.
Nick and I should probably talk about this not when he's on the spot, but if I could twist Nick's arm and get him to come to boot camp, do you think we could do a live full grain Q&A about leather?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As long as I don't have to be involved. But yeah, I mean that's kind of stuff that I would love to get set up. Let's fucking talk about this, Phil. Seriously.
I'm gonna
how do you make it more interactive? And we're also gonna have like live panels. We had a couple last year and they were really good, but we want to do more and we want to be able to capture them better. Like how do you not keep this all contained at the event, right? Because there's a lot of people who have a lot of interesting thoughts on a lot of things, and we want to get them out there.
Well, Nick and I were talking earlier today about this concept that Nick and I are somewhat isolated, or perhaps completely isolated, in Horween land. And we are aware that there is a land of leather that is not just Horween. And we've been asking a lot of these guests, thinking about Nick from Stridewise, for example, or even Dale from the last episode, to try to help us gain some clarity about our perspective with Horween leather. So what is it that you are seeing in the boot world in terms of leather? Are there certain trends? Are there certain things that you might say that, certain regions in the world or certain parts of the world are doing one particular thing better than another? Help us get some clarity on what you see in the boot world when it pertains to leather.
Some stuff is just, it's good. And it is like boilerplate, and this is what we're running with. And a lot of Horween leathers fulfill that for sure, right? I mean, Chrome XL, shell cordovan, but there's more, right? Like even the reverse CXL, right? Like natural CXL rough out is a fabulous leather. And then you start to get a little deeper. You're like, okay, well, what about this marine field? Like it's a little different. It's like kind of cool. And there's a lot happening. And I think that you begin to see things establish themselves as kind of can't miss stuff. No, it works, looks great, feels comfortable, sometimes feels comfortable enough to, justify everything else that is kind of coming from it. And so that's interesting. And like, you see certain things fall into place, right? Like I mentioned Merriam twice earlier, and they're a fantastic tannery that nobody knew about 5 years ago, and then Viberg started using them, and you're like, wow, this is some really great horse butt, and they're pretty small, and they can do things that are like semi-custom or more unique, and they just become like established, right? And like come out with a new article, and you're pretty confident that they're going to be good. And I think that kind of stuff is really interesting to see outside of a Horween or a Stead or whatever. I mean, in America, I mean, you've got Seidel, who everybody calls Seidel, but I recently recorded a podcast with the Fritzes, and they made it clear how their name is pronounced. So that's actually what I'm calling it now. And, you know, they come from making a whole bunch of basically unbranded work leathers for whites and nicks that have suddenly become branded because they're good and people are paying more attention to it. And they've got some tricks in the bag, man. Like they're starting to throw a lot more at it. And it's like, it's pretty cool to see. It's like a similar dynamic between junior and senior as what's going on at Horween, where there's somebody who's like, this is how we do it. And there's somebody who says, but what if we did this? And they're figuring out how to work together on that. And like, just the stuff that they're making, I think is true to what they are and what they do and what they've always done, but they want to push it forward, especially for footwear. Like that's cool. It's not just something that they happen to be making and they're like, oh, what if we put this on some boots? You see that too with Wicked and Craig, I would say for sure. Like they are, you know, kind of like a saddlery tanner historically, amongst other things, but they've really kind of put this focus on how do we make fantastic footwear leather specifically and know that it's going to be tough as guts but as beautiful as anything can get, and that is, you know, kind of like a perfect formula for them. And then you've got Ed Galoon, who's reviving this tannery that used to be absolutely gigantic, and like, you know, time and international, you know, kind of forces took their toll on it. And now here he is contract tanning out of law and making some of the coolest stuff that you've seen in incredibly small batches. Like you've never seen anything like this before, and only something on that scale could really produce that. Like especially like almost exclusively, like Ed's doing very, very interesting stuff. Especially with calf that you've like never really seen before. And it seems very geared towards this space, like bags, yes. But that, so like, I mean, yeah, just in the States is pretty cool. And like to have law doing what they always do at the same time and making this, you know, incredible bison leather, etc., is fantastic. So, you know, just in the States, I would say that's kind of the scale, is that like Horween's not stopping and they're not stopping innovating. And you see like a Seidel kind of pushing their way into this, saying like, we can make something actually like really premium too. I mean, it's all very exciting to me what's happening in the States right now, because like the numbers are limited, but it seems like every player is on board for this specific space, which I imagine helps them like, you know, sell other products to other manufacturers as well. But that to me is really exciting. You know, you go over to Italy and you have a tannery like Merriam who's doing a fantastic job, and people are really into it, and for good reason. There are, I mean, Ticho and I did an old episode where I feel like half of it was just going on a Google map and being like, if it says Conceria, we're gonna say the name of it right now, just to prove how many fucking tanneries there are in Tuscany. And it's insane. And I think you're going to start seeing more come out of that. Like, I mean, I think I could mention it, but so like Opera is a fantastic suede tannery, you know, like maybe they're like one A and 1B with Stead in some ways. And they can get more creative with it too. Like Yucatan for a long time has used all these printed suedes that like the underlying leather is beautiful. And then there's like this wacky print on it. And like Yuki has wielded it so well. but yeah, there's this guy that I met at the leather show in New York, Lorenzo, who works for Opera, but also works for this kind of new sub brand Atlantica, with my boy Bill from District Leather. And they're doing like these hand-dyed indigo suedes that are so cool. They're incredible, and they're backed by, this very consistent proving suede tanning process that Opera's been using. So that was one of the most fun things I found there. Tempesti too is doing really cool stuff. It can be like a little stuntier. I feel like if they find a middle ground, they'll do really well. But it's, like scuff off leathers. Oak Streets use them really well. But you handle it and you're like, oh my God. Because you go to a leather show and a lot of it is not destined for these products, Some of it's heavier weight belt leather, and some of it's upholstery, and some of it is just mass produced stuff for whatever kind of brand needs a ton of decent leather. And then you come across these things and you're like, oh my God, this has got it. And it's very easy for them to kind of stand out at a show like that. So yeah, like I think that Italian leather for boots, and it doesn't have to just be horsebutt, is completely untapped. And I don't think that the tanneries that are kind of in place in the boot world right now are going anywhere, because they're proven. They're all like kind of on the more boutique end, right? Like you can have a relationship with them like as a factory, and minimums are low. Like it's tough out there. Like the big stuff, the calf scene right now, it's a nightmare. It was like, why are you here? And they're like, well, we get to go to New York. I was like, right, but nobody can like buy your stuff right now, right? They're like, no, they can't. So like, who is the, more traditional kind of like box calf producer? Like not what Ed's doing. Like way more down the line. Who is that can kind of come up and fill that void? Like, I don't know, because there's, you can't get the hides, and there's a lot of, it's a big situation on the calf front right now. But at the same time, you're kind of seeing more boots and fewer dress shoes. And does it solve itself? I don't know. But like, I know a couple brands that are like, they're really stung by that, and it's kind of messing up their program, and there's nothing that can be done right now. So like, I think somebody needs to come on the scene on that front. Going back to the Thunderdome, there is a pair in there, and I don't know, this this could be a disaster. I'm kind of trying. You worry about like blowing stuff up that's like not in shape to be blown up, right? But my boy Dennis from Custom Craft, who hand makes boots in Germany and is wonderful at it, and is just a hell of a guy, drives to this tannery Kobel in somewhere Germany. I don't even know what town it is offhand. And just picks up kind of whatever leather they have. And there is a pair of boots in this Thunderdome, this Kobel leather that is so good. It's so good. Like whatever I say on this won't affect it. Like people are going to want this stuff. And I'm like, what the hell is happening in Germany, man? Like is there other stuff? What else is Kobel cooking up? Like who are they even making leather for? I don't know. But that was one of the most exciting leathers that outside of Dennis's stuff, like I've had zero experience with. It seems like it just works perfectly, at least for that pair of boots. And then, yeah, I mean, swinging back over here, like there's a lot of tanning in Mexico, and a lot of it is mass production, right? But I mean, I have, I don't know, 300 Lafargue swatches in my little closet where I have all my leather swatches, and some of them are like pink or like shimmery, like just probably not for these boots. And some of it you're like, stuff is pretty good, and are we all too hooked on like the highest of highest end leathers? And that's like the only thing that matters. But like, what about people who want something that like just is more affordable? Like they're big tannery, they do a ton of volume, The prices are pretty nice, and like people can get into that. There's a pair of boots. I won't say what place, but by the time this comes out, it'll be obvious that are this. We've always referred to it as local Indonesian pull up or rough out. It's just somebody's tanning in Indonesia, and nobody knows the name of the tannery, and maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. And that's what all those Indonesian brands were selling at the beginning. And like I have a pair of underhoods in this local Indonesian pull up that it's not Horween leather, but there's something to it, and they've gotten better. They've gotten a lot better. And there's this pair in this Thunderdome that is like, oh my God, do we have to come back to like local Indonesian leathers that allow these manufacturers to just more effectively create the things that we want, where they don't have to worry about importing like tiny quantities of Horween or Merriam or Stead or whatever, and go through that whole process and take all their lives figuring out how to get like 6 skins of this stuff into the country, when there's a guy down the block who's tanning this stuff that they're clearly working on. It's like a little thicker than it used to be and just richer. And yeah, I mean, it's tough, but at the same time, like, I don't know, you hear some things about Shinky where they're like, they're having trouble getting hides, and like this incredible, kind of mystical Japanese tannery. It's not just a demand question. It's like back to 2020, where can we get raw materials? Supply chain is broken kind of thing. And like that, like terrifies me, but they don't have economies of scale, and they need to get most of this stuff from somewhere, like from North America, I imagine, or maybe like Eastern Europe, where they're even getting their skins. And it's like, shit, is this not going to continue? So I think there's like incredible things happening in tanning, but it's also very easy to see how just like the forces of it all can, put the brakes on something that it really shouldn't be, and like would be kind of devastating to have like a Shinky in anything but a great place, So yeah, I mean, there's plenty out there. There's a lot to explore, and I think the second that anybody who's really into this is like, these are the only leathers that matter to me, because like I know deeply about them and I understand them all, and I'm spending a whole bunch of money on this. So I want to get it right. Like, that's totally understandable. But I think that, like, luckily there's always somebody out there kind of doing that next stage of exploration. And yeah, when it's going well, which I think it is right now, I think that people are kind of uncovering things that could be the right thing for somebody, whatever that means. It could be a cost thing, it could be they like a certain type of leather, whatever. But that's good. That's like good, healthy stuff, I think.
I like that answer a lot, and thank you for that. Helped me. But I also always keep coming back to my time before working for Nick and his family, where I didn't understand that leather wasn't just brown and it wasn't a singular type of thing. It's vast. And you sort of identified many specialty tanners, but when you start to talk about Mexico and Leon, all those tanneries, I mean, that type of city exists in many countries of places making a ton of leather. And historically, Germany has been a massive leather producer. So it is very difficult because it's not a singular thing, and each recipe is a little bit different. And I'm excited for it too, because I just love, I mean, it's a dorky, but I just really love leather, and I like seeing how it wears in. Yeah, a little bit. So yeah, it's cool to hear that perspective. So thank you for that. Did you have any initial reactions to that, Nick? Any thoughts?
No, I think that there's a lot out there, and I think that the industry in general, the leather industry, works better or works best, I think, when everyone is busy. I think when things start to get muddy, when people try to do. I guess I'm speaking in the more like specialized side of things. When people start to try to do what other people are doing, and that's not to say that that's not a way the market should operate, because it should. But I think that when everyone is busy, kind of to your point, which I think is what you were saying, Ben, when things feel like they're in a good place, that gives everybody the best options, because everyone is doing sort of what they're the best at. And it's easy, or I think it's maybe cyclically people sort of try to step outside of what they're doing, and that can be confusing to the market a little bit. I think that happens with calf at times, because it is such a hard, it's such a hard raw material to work with, and the people that are good at it are really good at it, which is why you can't get it from them, because they're selling what they can make. But it's a tricky industry. I'm not really giving a very good answer, but that's just sort of what I was thinking about when you were saying that, Ben.
Oh, that was a good answer.
That's a good answer. I mean, do I have to say this on this podcast? I don't care. I mean, Horween is still like the benchmark, and
in some ways,
what you talked about. Well, I mean,
I look at tannery stuff though, and I'm like, man, that's nice. I wish I could make that, something like that. But then we like anybody else, we try it and we're like, it's just not as good. So they should buy that, and we should make our stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're not calf tannery, you're not suede tannery, but like, that chase. Like, I can imagine how you could feel that sometimes, where people are like, "Oh, well, I like this, but could you make it like this Horween product?" And like there's definitely that happening. And can you do it a little cheaper?
Well, the price thing drives a lot of the conversation at times.
Yeah, I imagine. But I mean, pushing everybody. I don't know. I don't know enough about tanning to know that you can try and make something like somebody else is doing, and maybe get part of the way there and have a great product at like the right price for somebody else, which I think is very valuable. But just like learn some shit along the way, I imagine that's happening. And so, like that, the benchmark is very important, I think, but it's also not one. Horween can't supply leather for all these boots. That doesn't seem possible, but
we'll try.
Yeah, I mean, keep trying, and make that natural M's horse butt that I've been on your personal butt for a while. But yeah, I think that there's clearly a focus by a whole bunch of tanneries, like just on what ultimately is a fairly small footwear market. And I don't fully understand if that's like a showpiece, or again, you can use it for other products, or we're just getting our name out there. But part of me thinks that they just realize that their leathers never look better than, like a really worn wallet, sure, but there's just something about it, like a pair of boots or shoes that they're drawn to, and they want to see their product on. And if that's like the test that they have to be put through for these tanneries, that's great. I think it's wonderful, especially just some of this more rugged stuff that was seeing action in other places, and now it's like, oh wait, we maybe twist this a little bit, or just ship it to you as it was, and it's going to work great on this pair of boots. Maybe after you break them in for a little bit. I forgot to mention like Baker, J&FJ Baker, who, God, the leather they make is absolutely phenomenal, and might not immediately be seen as suited for footwear. Like, it's heavy, it's unbelievable. The best belt I have is just Baker harness or whatever it is, and to see people like gutting it out in these things, and eventually being like, actually, could we make that like 5 ounces? And they'll be like, maybe not, but maybe. there's something to it, and like that tannery is literally in a building that they've been in for like 600 years or something insane.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And like just breaking into boots.
It's not that easy though, and we're coming to the end of the time here, but translating different weights for different formulations doesn't always translate, especially belt weight stuff.
Totally.
Yeah, so they have to do a lot of work to figure it out. It's not necessarily fun.
No, it's not.
Or inexpensive.
No, but leather world is rich right now, but I don't think that those old favorites are to be overlooked or forgotten. Like that's something that it took me a while to get there, but it's a place I've been for probably the last couple of years. Is like, yeah, why? Like these things are great. Find a new pattern or something or whatever, or just do it. Like they're not boring. You might just think they are until you're actually wearing them.
All right, Ben. Well, hey, thanks for being on the show, man. I think you are the. Am I mistaken in this? I think you're the first repeat guest we've had on the show.
Really?
I think you might be. Is that accurate, Nick?
I think that's right.
Was the first one the one that like where you took over my show and then we both published it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Should we count it?
Yeah,
you're famous now for being the repeat hero.
This is great.
You're the best, man. And I'm looking forward to dragging Nick out to New York to go to boot camp.
Yeah, my intention is to go.
I appreciate that intention.